Hi, this is Don Clark of FileMakerProGurus.com and FM Database Consulting. I'm going to be interviewing today Nick Lightbody of Deskspace CMS out of England. That's a new content management system that is really a great deal, and it works right out of FileMaker. And as a guest appearance, we have Mike Beargie of Mainspring. He's going to be sitting in on the whole interview. We had some technical difficulties, so the very first part of the interview is gone. And so it starts in the middle of a sentence with Nick, but that's okay. Everything that we have on there is great content for today. The first 15 minutes is just wonderful technical talk about different things going on with FileMaker, and after that we get into the Deskspace CMS product. Thanks for joining us today.
And she knew a bit about what I was doing. She's worked for me in the past when she was sort of university and things, and she looked at what I was doing 2 years ago. She said, "You know, Dad, you should really read this book." And she gave me this book called Responsive Web Workflows by a guy called Stephen Hay. Because RGA had Stephen Hay, who's an American who lives in Holland, in to teach their web guys how to do the web properly. To make it mobile first, not to make it mobile second.
Right.
And the big problem is a lot of traditional web stuff, people are trying to compress big stuff down to small, using a lot of JavaScript and so on. And in fact, if you start off with small and make it big, it's far quicker, far more efficient, and works far faster. And you know much more about them than I do, Mike, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's my that was my advice for people when they wanted to do like single layout solutions for that would work on FileMaker Go and FileMaker Pro and WebDirect. I would say, like, well, build it for your smallest device and then make it adapt for larger ones. So, and then I recommended that they just make two separate layouts in FileMaker altogether, because you shouldn't have an iPhone layout and a desktop layout. They're two platforms that are completely different, so they have earned their own interface, so to speak.
I'd probably have a very interesting debate with you on that subject. We'd probably have to have a couple of beers and some nachos as well when we did it. But I've taken the view, perhaps slightly extreme, but I believe in simplicity, extreme simplicity, and I design stuff so that it's suitable for the smallest possible device. Most of my layouts are about this big. And with the arrival of button bars, with the fact that the very wonderful thing, repeating fields, scale proportionally, and obviously also lists and portals essentially scale proportionally. With those three objects, you can make really nice, stretchy layouts that do anything. So yeah, that's my approach, is to produce. Well, okay, I'm being extreme. There are some times when it pays to have what I call a two-panel screen, where you've got the records you've filtered and found on the left. You click on one, you display it on the right, you edit there.
Master detail is the official terminology for that. But FileMaker would need to give us that master detail type, so we could put a list view and a form view layout together. That would be great.
On the same layout.
On the same layout.
Yeah.
But we use portals for all that sort of stuff, because we find portals give very good performance on reasonable sized data sets. And one of the things I'll do in my presentation tomorrow morning is look at the pros and cons of portals and lists.
It's even better now that they've done the portal loading optimizations in 15.
Yes.
It was kind of one of those silent things that snuck in, but is actually really
And most
important.
people didn't even realize it, but you're seeing it now more on websites and stuff like that too. When you start going places, it was one of those things I never saw, and I was going,
Right.
what are they talking about with that? And then I realized, holy cow, that works wonderfully.
And the little clue is that it's a little progress thing that actually.
Yeah, you get a little progress thing loading these records, and actually WebDirect had it for list views in version 14, but they adapted that technology to portals for version 15 platform-wide.
And what I didn't realize when I first saw it was that you could continue to work on other things while it loaded the contents of the portal. So they're looking at it going, that's really neat, but
but it's essentially it's sort of an extra thread, isn't it?
I don't know exactly how it works. I haven't talked to my technical contact at FileMaker about how it works. When WebDirect first came out and I was ripping apart WebDirect to figure out how it was actually generating its pages and taking things, or doing what I call the FileMaker magic of, like updating it in one place and having it push out to everywhere else. I was trying to figure out how that worked, and I hadn't really played with. I'd heard about what WebSockets are. I already knew what Ajax was, but I wasn't very familiar with long polling. So I did all my research and kind of figured it out. And once you understand how something works, it becomes very easy to see kind of your path towards optimizing it.
Yeah, well, that helps certainly.
Yeah, well, I actually, people have been using the term long polling quite a long time. I actually got John Thatcher to explain to me exactly what it was, because I wasn't sure I really understood what it was. I don't think what he said now, but it was a lot simpler than I thought, actually. It was actually, I have to ask John exactly what his definition was. How would you define long polling, Mike?
Long polling? Long polling would be, an easy way to explain it. It's basically when a view is first sent to the client will send a poll to the web server, essentially creating an always-on connection that it's connected and waiting for updates. So it's the long part of it is because it's reaching towards the server, and then the polling is that it's actually polling the server for waiting for an update. But it's inefficient to do that because that network stack there, that piece of the network layer has to always kind of be on, waiting for that uptate. And if it gets interrupted, it causes things like forced disconnects and things not working, or things taking a long time to run because it needs to pull that poll back and then go. So when you switch to webhooks, webhook is the opposite way around. The server knows that somebody's hooked in, or not webhooks, sorry, WebSockets.
WebSockets.
Yeah.
WebSockets is you open up a socket as part of your existing connection to the website, and it's much more efficient because it allows for server to client communication to do that push. So basically, it's not the client registering saying, "Hey, I'm ready for an update." The server already knows that client's there, and then when it gets an update, it checks to see if that client's ready and pushes it. So it's a much more efficient way, and the 25% speed boost in WebDirect between 13 and 14 was primarily because of the switch from long polling to WebSockets.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, on older browsers that don't support WebSockets, it defaults back to long polling still.
It has to have a backwards path, otherwise it wouldn't
yeah.
work. But that's a long way from doing Apple Talk,
Yeah.
where they used to chatter. There was a lot of I'm here.
Yes.
See me.
Well,
So that was a really slow protocol for that in that particular instance.
Yeah,
So
that's
was,
the paper cups on string approach.
Yes.
Thinking about efficiency things, the thing I particularly liked was, I'm not sure, has Clay done his session yet?
Clay Meckel about the Draco?
Yeah.
No, that is at 3:45 today.
Okay. Well, I think that I saw some stuff from his session in a session somebody else did last week in Santa Clara, and I talked to him about it. I think that the really nice thing in that session is going to be his thing about how they're dealing with the cache data in 15. I'm sure you know about that already.
Yeah, a little bit.
My understanding, and you can put me right if I got this wrong, is that essentially what used to happen with FileMaker 14 was that when you opened the app, you got obviously the download of the theme that was being used. We're assuming we're going over WAP here, obviously.
Okay.
So you got the theme, and you got stuff being cached and reused. And assuming that the app has been well constructed, so that there are no local styles, it means that once the theme is on the device, on the user's device, then there's no more information about styling required to come from the server. If there's any local styles on a layout, as we all know, it causes enormous load because every single page, every single layout refresh, that data is reloaded from the server.
Mm-hmm.
But what Clay's done with 15, as I understand it, is when you come back, when the user starts another session and restarts FileMaker, instead of creating a new cache from scratch, he's finding the old one and reusing it as much as possible.
Okay.
And that's giving a major improvement in startup speed and in I think in speed. Is that about what you understand, or have you got some more gen on it, Mike?
Yeah, but to build on that, I think also that when they're actually pushing layout and potential object style updates now, they're doing it on the object level for their push instead of re-pushing the CSS for the entire page. So they're doing kind of like what you would expect, like a JavaScript DOM update that changed the styling of one object.
So they're going real granular on the object. Then if it hadn't changed, then they okay.
Well, that's why
the
you have
word.
performance. If you're only changing the little bit that changed instead of refreshing the whole page.
Exactly.
Then,
Yeah, just bring over what needs to be.
yeah.
Which is actually part of where FileMaker's been going over the last several versions, because it used to be under 13. If you refreshed anything, the entire screen refreshed. It's only we started seeing the ability
Refresh object, I think,
Refresh
was
object?
14, and refresh portal
Mhm.
2.
Mm-hmm.
So on 14.
Because I remember doing a demo showing an early version of one of our mobile architectures to some guys at Apple and Cupertino, and they blinked when they realised that on a screen with some stuff on it and a portal, that if you refreshed anything on the screen, the entire screen redrew. And I was sort of cringing, it's like, oh, I know it's horrible,
Yeah.
but it's so there's a big,
well,
some really
FileMaker
big
Go
improvements
was,
since
yeah.
then.
I don't know if you remember the paid for FileMaker Go 11, the first version they came out
Yeah,
with.
$30 or 19 and 29 or
19 or
39.
something. Well, the FileMaker Go that wasn't made by FileMaker way back before that was $50.
Okay.
And that was the one that just used like I don't know, XML result set or whatever to pull
Mhm.
data into FileMaker or data into iOS. But yeah, this one you would like 2-finger scroll to or 1-finger scroll to go down, and as soon as you let go, it would go blink. It would go white and like come back,
Reload everything.
and then have a slight like little jump with position adjustment. So they've learned a lot over. What did they say? It was 6 years old now.
Yeah,
FileMaker Go?
2010.
2010.
I don't remember that date. The date I remember was April 2012, when I had lunch in Santa Clara with the guy who was then FileMaker VP Sales, Keith Robinson, and he said, well, in a short period, probably at DevCon soon after that they were going to announce, or maybe even it was before that, but they were going to announce that they were making Go free, when it had previously been a $20 or $40 product.
Mhm.
And that's the point I realised. That's the point when I had the revelation, as St. Paul on the road to Damascus, well, I had the revelation. I suddenly thought, this was April 2012, I suddenly thought, God, the future is mobile, isn't it? The future is mobile. At that point, I went back to Britain, talked to my guys there, and we agreed that all of our old development work we put into one side, we were taking a big clean sheet of paper, and we were going to start everything from scratch. Because you couldn't realistically take all that old stuff and make it mobile. It just doesn't work. It's just too busy, too much stuff.
And there's too much stuff, too much clutter. It's built
Yeah.
into it, essentially. If you use the formatting, the painter tool on anything, how do you get rid of that? You have to redo it. Otherwise you got a lot of overhead.
So as they do keep continuing with FileMaker Go, the top navigation and bottom navigation parts were, I think, straight out of iOS. I mean, I've done an app in Xcode now, so I know kind of the design objects that they give you there, and the slide control with the 3 little dots. That seems like something that was out of there. The popover object seems like it was out of there.
Yeah, you wouldn't reinvent the wheel, would you, if you've got those things there?
So I mean, well, all you have to do is download a free copy of Xcode and look what else is there, and to see kind of get some ideas about where the future would be going. So
I haven't been in Xcode in a while. I did do an app back in 2011.
It was really annoying.
It was difficult
I
back
finally had to upgrade to El Capitan. I was holding off for a while to wait for the early adopters to work out all the bugs, and I finally had to update because I updated my phone to iOS 9.1 at the time, and I plugged it in. I tether it because I use it as my testing device for the app that I developed. And it wouldn't recognize my phone in Xcode anymore, and it wouldn't let me update Xcode until I upgraded to El Capitan to get the.
They get you one way or another.
So they got me one way or another.
So tell us more about the Deskspace CMS. Your version 3, did you
CMS or
say?
CRM?
CMS.
Okay.
It's content management system. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
People usually get the two confused.
Yes.
So yeah.
There's ERP too. Don't forget that.
There's a lot of
acronyms out
a
there.
lot of acronyms.
Yes.
So we've just completed. We haven't quite released V3. I said I'd release it at this event. It's probably going to be tomorrow after I've got past my presentation and put that out of the way. So we've got a completely redesigned user interface. It's got about 250, 260 individual control settings for a page, and it has a full set of page overrides so that every bit of styling in the page, we're talking about fonts, font weights, styling, padding, margins, colors, background colors, edging colors, widths. There's, you've done this stuff for years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff you can put in there, but what we've done is taken the approach that Stephen Hay has in his book as a starting point. And I very rarely read books on technology. I like to just do it. But this occasion I said, okay, this old project has suddenly been canned. I've got a gap in my schedule. I'm just going to sit with that book on page 1 and read my way down and build the stuff that he suggests. So I did it all longhand in a text editor. I used Pandocs, I used Dexy, the various command line apps applications that Stephen recommended you use. I got it all working fine, very short, very sweet. But it was slow. Actually using the tools was slow. Using a command line thing like Pandocs, it was taking, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 20 seconds to build a page. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, you sort of start, a little thought goes back in your head, maybe I could do it in FileMaker. And then I thought, and the thought got bigger and bigger. And eventually I thought, really, this is so slow. And I mean, I could see all these things I was having to do manually. Why can't I just mechanize it with FileMaker? So it took me a couple of evenings to write the basic code in FileMaker to do the basic stuff. And it was pretty fast. And then I developed it, optimized it. But it took about a month to get a product running that I could use to create our own website and do some other websites with. And then it was beginning of September through to the end of December to build a product, V1. The very first external user who picked it up was a guy called Ewan Kavanagh, who's the managing director of a family meat processing business in Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. They employ, I think, 78 staff, and they're one of the leading sausage making facilities in Europe. And they use FileMaker to run their entire factory, their entire business.
Yeah.
And that should be out in the very near future as a new FileMaker case study. And I was talking to Kevin Mallon about it this morning. It's been prepared by the guys in Britain. I've given them as much help as I can, and I think they'll get a sign off on it pretty soon.
Cool.
And it's an exciting story because it's about a citizen developer, a person who wasn't a FileMaker developer, who's used FileMaker to build this system. The reason he came to us, though, was in the meat processing, or in fact the food business generally, there is a vast amount of documentation on standard operating procedures and on things to do with contracts for different customers. So in the factory, on the production lines, they actually have to have access to documentation on what they should be doing. And this was done on paper. Obviously, the old story. So Ewan's...
That was the keynote story this year too. paper trail replacement.
Yeah. So Ewan, what Ewan wanted, what he envisaged, he said, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if I could take all these documents and have them in HTML and put them so that I'm dynamically getting the right contextual documents on an iPad on the factory floor. The question was how to convert this stuff into HTML, into web pages which were readable. Mm-hmm. Then he noticed stuff I'd posted on the FileMaker community forum about the early versions of what became Deskspace CMS, and he tried a copy, liked it, came and gave him a newer copy. He liked that, so he's done that and done everything with it. And it's a great example because he could just take documents, paste them into the app, click the button, bang, the page is built, just like that. And it takes literally hundredths of a second to do it.
It's fast.
It's fast, mm-hmm. and it's self-contained. So the code you create like that, you could, if you just take that lump of code, it's a complete HTML page which requires nothing external, unless there are links to external images and so on, which you can then put in a web viewer and view. So when you download Deskspace CMS and you get the license to agree, the license is actually a styled license in a web viewer, not a little text thing. Mm-hmm. And Don, you've had to play with it.
I've had to play with it. I've built some stuff with it. Yeah, it took a while for me to figure it out because I just had to play with it, But and I'm not a great CSS HTML guy. I've done some of it over the years, here and there. I never have become expert at it. I do WordPress, but that's not a whole lot of HTML and CSS. There's a little here, a little bit there. But I enjoyed it. And I saw the overrides. That's what I was trying to figure out, the overrides. And then when I make a mistake with something, I mess something up, I have to go back and try to figure it out. I learned quite a bit and put together some pages and integrated some data into it. So that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have the ability to go in and change some of the CSS. I had to, in the version I had, and I know you're talking about a more advanced version where somebody gets training, they're able to unlock that feature and be able to do a lot more magic with CSS. And that's when I think that product's going to really take off at that point. For people just doing straightforward stuff, it's really nice. But if for somebody that wants to be a little creative, that's going to be the key.
I'd agree. And the way that we do the licensing is you download the app. It'll allow you to do 3 web pages, so you can make a little site for trial purposes. Do whatever. In fact, we published the whole of the King James Bible on a single page. So technically, you could actually publish 3 very large books on 3 web pages.
Yeah.
The performance data we've done shows that up to 70,000 words. Am I talking words? Yes, I'm talking words. I think an average book of fiction is probably in the region of 100 to 120,000 words. The testing we did probably almost a year ago, we've got some graphs, some charts on deskspace.com showing the results of the testing. Up to about 70,000 words, the processing is virtually instantaneous. I mean, maybe a second or two. As it goes above 70,000 up towards 100,000 words, we're starting to hit some, I suspect, some caching areas which are slowing it down. Mm-hmm. We then did some optimization to speed it up further. So it is, you can essentially publish a novel on a page if you want, is what it comes down to. The licensing, when you want to go beyond 3 pages, you put in your details, click the button to request a license. We get that message on the licensing server, and we then allocate a license, and the license that comes back to you, you get an email that just comes back, and you just copy and paste the content of the email into the field in the app. It then decrypts the parts of the license code it needs to use,
cool.
And it sets the settings. Mm-hmm. And when I designed that system last year, I included, as you would, some spare characters within the licensing strings so you can put in some other stuff. And I've used one of them so far. And the second one is going to be to put in a flag for whether or not the license is for a pro user. The pro user will just need to satisfy us that they are reasonably competent in using the application.
or sign an agreement that you won't support them if they mess things up.
Well, maybe Mike, you can
As
help us with that.
as a consultant, yeah, we do have a contract for if the people we do work for have an in-house developer, it's a separate contract for when we hand our work over to them. It's basically an absolution of all responsibility.
You're on your own.
Yeah, and so, well, what
Kinda.
it actually, for consultants, it comes very expensive to spend the time to hunt down errors that are caused by other developers that don't know what they're doing. They might have cleared part of a calculation somewhere very deeply embedded, and in FileMaker we don't have automatic or very great subversioning to be able to
Yes, that's true.
control
You can't go back
changes
forth,
from
yeah.
file to file. Or in Xcode, it's great. It's a great example of subversioning, and I hope they eventually adopt this. But basically, every time you make a commit, it will tell you exactly which files changed and down to the line, what was added, what was removed.
Had to get back into Xcode a
side
little
by
bit. It's
side,
been
and
a
it
while.
gives you this really nice, clean side-by-side interface that shows you where something was removed, it shrinks down. Something was added, it shrinks up with lines around the area that changed, and you get a side-by-side detail of everything that changed, and you can track
It's
that
all the
back.
fun out of troubleshooting bugs and stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, so I can go. I mean, in Core Scope, I can go back to like 5 iterations back and figure out where I had added this function and track that function as I've built it over each commit and figure out exactly where I'm on. And it's a very short process instead of a very expensive
Time-consuming,
process.
Well, currently in FileMaker, the best option that I'm familiar with is using FMDiff, which if you have your own versioning system, so that when I create a new solution, when I create a new app,
Yes, right. It's an app now.
the very first table I ever create or I paste in is a version history table. That's the first thing for anything. And if you then maintain a system of certainly daily changing the version number, adding a number, putting in some notes about what you did, maybe putting in some notes about items that you know that are outstanding to be done, and then zipping that copy so it's a permanent archive and continuing with another copy. If you do that and you have that sort of issue, you can at least use FMDiff to compare the two files. Frighteningly fast. Unfortunately, the very clever chap who wrote it,
Winfried
is dead now. But his
Did he
business,
pass away?
Yes,
Okay.
he's gone, I'm afraid, along with Chris Manton, another very sad loss to us this year. But his business partner is continuing with it. But today, actually, I was talking to Todd Geist and looking at the
FM Perception.
the new
Yes.
thing, FM Perception.
The gentleman that wrote FM Perception was the guy that taught me Objective-C, so I could write Core Scope.
Okay.
He's a local guy in Central Ohio, and he's a part
He
of our
works with
user
Todd?
group.
Is that the guy you pointed out to me the other night?
He has a working arrangement with
The
Todd.
guy with the big beard?
Yeah.
The guy with the big beard,
Yeah.
James Ramsey.
Okay.
And he basically wrote it, didn't want to do the distribution and support network, so Geist Interactive had that in place, and it worked out, and so now it's being distributed. But I've been since pre-alpha using Dave's solution.
And how does it compare with FMDiff? There must be some pros and cons, I guess.
So it does more than a diff. A diff is kind of a side feature of FM Perception. FM Perception itself is designed to read a DDR file out of a document very fast. It can do about a 2 gigabyte DDR file in under like 30 seconds. And everything is instantly searchable, but also referenceable. So like if I wanted to figure out, I have a global variable that I have in my file, and something's going wrong with this global variable, so I need to find out where I used that. I can generate that DDR, load it in like 10 seconds, and they have a script reference or a variable thing that will show you all of your global variables in your file, and then I choose that one in the next column, and it's like a folder view, like you would expect in
Hierarchical
OS 10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and you click down, and it will tell you every layout, every script step, every calculation that uses that global variable. So then I can track and try to figure out where something wrong.
Wow, that's nice.
It's got a broken reference feature, so you click on that, it tells you all of those things.
I think what Dave was explaining to me earlier was the key difference between his app, which is doing the sort of stuff that Base Elements does and also Analyzer does in that way. Big difference is that his compiled app is directly reading the XML DDR, whereas the other versions are taking the XML DDR, analyzing it,
importing it, and
importing
parsing
it into,
Parsing it.
and that's why the
Right.
process is a much faster one, because he's not doing that, he's just querying it directly, which I thought was really smart.
Well, and he's also controlling it at the thread level, because it's a native OS 10 app, and soon to be a native Windows app as well, because he's working in C#. I've heard some of the sailor cursing that he's had about C# working on the Windows version of it. But
I showed this to John Thatcher at FileMaker last week, and when he'd seen it, he then fixed up a meeting for me to show it to 5 of his colleagues. None of them had seen anything like it before. They couldn't believe actually how simple it was. But what I do is I do observe, measure, analyze, and create something that is simple. I'm way past in my productive career creating complex stuff because I can. What I'm into is creating stuff that's really simple. And FileMaker as a platform is very well suited to doing things very well that are simple, that have been well designed, and avoid unnecessary complexity. And then that's when you really get performance.
And with that, we're going to call it quits. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Gentlemen, thank you very much for
Pleasure, Don.
doing it.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Nice to have
Appreciate it.
pleasure
You
to
too,
talk
Nick.
to you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.